Smash! Space Marines.
Hey, today we're going to be doing another Space Marine painting tutorial by utilizing two of very old models that I kit bashed on the channel ages ago. These models are from the Space Marine kit bashing video I did forever ago. Well, one of them was. But you probably guessed, you clicked on the video, the chapters we're going to be painting are the closest Space Marine bros in the entire setting. The Blood Swords and the Star Dragons. I like these chapters. And though I did give the Blood Swords a little bit of a hard time in my goofy Space Marine color scheme video, I still like it. It's definitely unique, you gotta give him that. But with this video, I'm basically doing a cleaning the pile of shame, Space Marine kit bashing, whatever you want to call it. But not only with this tutorial will I show you how to paint their schemes, we're also going to go over painting their chapter badges. That's right, we're going to be doing a little bit of freehand. But before we get into it, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you like what you see, share it with a friend, and if you really dig it, consider becoming a channel member. Get some extra goodies, get to see my videos early, and you get exclusive channels in the official Mishmash Discord. Want to extend a huge thank you to my channel members. You guys are amazing. Like always, before we get to the actual painting, here's a little list of all the paints I used. The first Marine I'm going to begin with is the Star Dragon, and I would start out by zenithal priming and spraying over using some royal blue from Army Painter Fanatic. You can just brush this on, I just find the airbrush to be faster. Once the base coat was dry, I would apply skeleton bone to all the tabards, purity seals, and any sort of papery, feathery things on the model. Of course, this is a very thin paint, so go over using two thin coats. And not only will we be applying this to the tabard, I would also apply this to the trims of the pauldrons. This is kind of essential, so make sure to really get this base coat down. Once I was happy with that placement, I would apply some black paint to all the weapons, the chest symbol, and the backpack. And as always, just the little tubes connecting the legs and the arms. Try your best not to apply this on any of the blue, just be careful so it doesn't flick off and go crazy. Now I'm going to be shading the entirety of the blue, and to do this I am mixing Druchii Violet 1:1 with some Drakenhof Nightshade. Now I've seen the Star Dragons depicted with all kinds of blues, but I really want to go for that dark purplish blue. And the Druchii Violet really helps us get there. If you really wanted to, I think it would actually be a little bit better to use a little bit more Druchii Violet. I just find the 50-50 mix to be more of a better safe than sorry recipe. Again, do your best not to apply this on any of the little tan or tabardy areas. I'm being very careful when applying this to the pauldrons. It's not the end of the world, it's just that you want to avoid more cleanup than you need to. Now for any little skulls on the outlying sections of the model, I'm just using a little bit of black to base coat them. And we're going to be coming back to the pauldrons and applying Imperial Fist over them. Unfortunately, I was a little overzealous and I didn't get this on camera as well as I could have. But the basis of this is we're going to make this guy look like an old 2nd edition Ultramarine. Like I mentioned, it's integral that you have a good coverage using the skeleton bone. As you can see, the little smudges in the inner portion of the pauldron are not super sightly. It doesn't matter too much because you're not going to be looking at the model from that angle. Just use it as an example. Now coming back in, we're going to be washing the entirety of the tabards using some light tone from Army Painter. I'll also be applying this to the shoulder trim. Just make sure to really get this and work it into the nooks and crannies. It's something you'll have to babysit a little bit, so don't worry too much if you have any smudging. We can work it into the color scheme later on using some highlighting. Also, be sure to not get this too much on the blue, especially when applying it to the pauldrons. This is a little bit more difficult to work out of the color scheme. Now coming back to the black portions we intend to be metallic, I'm going to be painting these using Vallejo Model Air Steel. This paint is very bright, which I think plays in very well to the official artwork. This paint is relatively thin, by the way, so don't expect to go on with a one thick coat. For the Aquila, it's a little easier, but the backpack you're certainly going to need two. To paint in the tubes separating the arms and the legs, I'm just painting in using some gunmetal. Once I was done with that, I would come back in on the blue armor, and I'm just cleaning up using some thick highlights of royal blue once more mixed with just a touch of white. These are more so to be splotchy and messy. They're basically a nice little background and a go-between the base color and the highlights. The sharpest highlights, to be specific. As you can see, I'm kind of implementing my sketchy style back into this miniature. I do want him to be a little bit more clean, but having these sketchy little damaged chips on him makes him look a little bit more interesting in my eyes. Do it to your leisure. Now to shade the metallics, man that's satisfying, I'm using some Oblivion Blackwash from Two Thin Coats. Nuln Oil and black inks would work just fine, I just really prefer the finish that Two Thin Coats washes have over any other. Now coming back to the tabard and all the cream cloth, I'm re-highlighting using my sketchy method with just a little bit of skeleton bone. I want to apply this to the broader sections, and I really want to sketch this on because I think this is a much more fun way to paint tabards. That's totally not a cop-out for me not painting super clean lines. It's a style thing. What can I say? But this is a really fun method in my eyes. It adds a lot more life to the cloth itself in a lot of ways. It really kind of gives the impression that it's flicked around and that he's really run through some of the elements. Just be careful not to put this too much into the shaded regions. I almost did that by accident, and I would also apply this to the purity seals and any other elements on the miniature. Now to come back in and highlighting the blue armor, I'm adding a significantly larger amount of white to the mix. For this, it's a roughly 2 to 3 on the blue to the white. As you can see, it's definitely much more apparent on the model, and I'm coming back in with my sketchy method. I really like how this looks on this scheme. I really do have a soft spot for painting blue marines. Ultramarines are not my favorite, but these guys are kind of close in terms of color scheme, so you can really play around with this. I really want to flick these around, kind of add in some character. If you want to do it cleanly, be my guest. I just think this is a very fun way to really spice up Space Marines. Like always, make sure you have a good tip on your brush. That will really play into getting on these sketchy highlights. It's just going in with like a pencil, basically. Now to highlight the yellow, I'm actually just painting on the sharper edges using some warm yellow from Pro-Acryl. But to highlight it, I'm using some warped yellow from Army Painter Fanatic. We're just going to want to focus these highlights on the rivets and the sharpest details of the pauldrons. Just try your best to focus this. It's a little bit more difficult to paint the trim of pauldrons, especially if you're new to the hobby, so don't stress about it too much. Of course, I'm going to encourage you to try something new and try something that you're a little intimidated by, but if you just want to get these models done for the tabletop, I wouldn't worry about it. Now coming back to the tabard, I'm doing an additional highlight using some Brain Matter Beige. That's a really weird name for a paint. But this is a very good creamy color, and it'll really make the cloth stand out. Just simply apply this the same way you did with the previous color. Just apply it a little bit more sparingly and on the sharper details. Coming back to the metallic bits once the shade is settled, I'll be dry brushing on using a little bit more Vallejo Model Color Steel, this of course being the Air Edition. And once I was happy with the dry brushing, I added in just an additional highlight using my brush. Again, you don't have to do this, but I think just applying a little bit to the tips of the Aquila really makes it stand out. Now to add an additional little layer to the metallics, I would fill in the more mechanical elements of this backpack using some Black Legion. This being the little mechanical tubes, the pods of the backpack, whatever you want to call these, the nodules, the orbs. This just kind of brings in a little bit more character to the backpack. It gives a little bit more depth, and it gives it a little bit more character. Now, for the guy's melon, I wasn't really sure what to do, so I ended up actually using a head that I painted way back in the flesh painting tutorial. Now, technically, the Star Dragons have these cool scar-like tattoos all over their bodies, and this guy has a scarred face. It's not exactly what I would like it to be, but it's close enough. If you're looking to paint their eyes, I would strongly suggest just using the classic method of painting it in using a little bit of white, and filling it in using some Blood Angels Red or some Magmadroth Flame. But the one final thing that we have to do is this chapter badge. Now for this, I actually consulted somebody that's a bit of an expert in this. In my humble opinion, Leia Warhammer is the aficionado of the Star Dragons. She's been painting these guys for a while, has a hell of an army, check her out on Instagram. And she actually taught me a really good method for painting their chapter badge. As you can see, she labeled out basically everything you need to know in terms of painting it using a numbered method. Now you'll probably notice that her chapter symbol differs a little bit from the official one. but I attempted to do kind of a hybrid version of hers and the official one. Now to start things out, I'm applying this using bold titanium white, and you'll really want to have a good tip on your brush. You'll probably notice that I use a different one. The first foundation is we're going to be sketching in our first line, and this serves as the foundation of the chapter symbol itself. Now we'll be going in using this curved line here to focus up the neck. This is where things get a little rough, and I end up switching up my brush, and don't worry, you can clean this up using a good combination of blue mixed with some dark purple from Acrylic. Now coming in here, I'm sketching in the lower jaw, and we're just going to connect this to the neck. I'll also sharpen in the tip of the jaw as well as the inner maw. Now I'm painting in the upper portion of the snout, and you can see I'm painting in kind of a sharper detail for the snout itself. I'll then be sketching in the back portion of the dragon, and I kind of want to build the foundation of his face. This portion is more just to connect the entirety of the symbol. I'm not really focused on making sharp, high detail lines. I'm also taking a moment to just fill in the inner portion of the head itself. And that's exactly what we're doing now. You really want to be thin with this application. White paint is not very forgiving, it can be very chalky, so go in very, very slowly. This takes time. Now I'm going to be cleaning up the chapter symbol using a mix of blue and dark purple from Acrylic. This is a good foundation for sketching this in. It's relatively similar to the paint that we have on the model itself. And I'm just blocking in and adding in a little bit more crisp detail. Now we're coming back in and I'm refilling some of the areas using some more white. I'm crisping up some of the details. I'm just adding in little mini flicks. Really the biggest thing you need to remember is be thin with this. Not too thin so it pools everywhere, but thin enough that it won't really gunk up the model. And though I kinda wish I had more room to work with, I think this is a perfectly servable chapter badge. Sketch in your details, clean up around it, and rinse and repeat until you're happy with the chapter badge. And I'm pretty damn happy with this. I'm decent with freehand, but I gotta give a lot of credit where credit's due. Leia's method really does serve well. It's Leia, right? Please tell me it's not Leah. Anyway, I am super happy with this model. Painting blue is something that I always have fun with, and I love painting yellow more than just about any other color. So it's kind of a shock that it took me this long to paint this chapter. But as they say, better late than never. Plus it feels nice to finally have paint on this model. He's been kit-bashed for months now. But moving on, we're now going to be painting the blood sword, and to start him out I Zenithal primed him and sprayed him down with some Mephiston red. It really took a few tries to get this red right. I'm still not 100% sure, but I think Mephiston red is your best bet. Obviously here, we're going to be painting all the black elements of the miniature using Vallejo Model Color Black. There's not really a lot to go off of, I'm just painting the backpack and the guns and the sword, as well as any intersecting tubes that are connecting the appendages. Once I was done with that, I would apply a lot of Carroburg Crimson over the entire model. I'm really being heavy with this application. I don't want to spill any or have any of it pool, but just make sure that you get a heavy coating over the entirety of the red. We really want to tone this down. It's not often that I have problems with Carroburg Crimson pooling. This is a pretty reliable shade. But once it's dry, I would go over using a makeup brush and I would dry brush over the entirety using some more Mephiston red. I would then go over again using the dry brush, however I'd angle this primarily on the sharper details of the model using some dragon red. Initially I was going to go for the more Blood Angels red color, but I think it's better if I go for the more pinkish red. Blood Angels are definitely more on the side of an orangier red. Once I was done with my dry brushing, I would manually highlight over the entirety of the model using some dragon red mixed with dark warm flesh from Acrylic. This section is tedious, but this really makes the model pop out. I really want to focus this primarily on the sharpest edges, and I would apply my sketchy method later on. But I think for this is what really brings the red together. I would do some more fussing later on, but we'll get to that later. Coming back in, the dry brushing over the black left a lot of red remnants, so I'm just reapplying a little bit of black to clean it up. After I'm finished with the application of black, I would apply some dark silver over these areas. However, I'm going to be sparing with this. I'm going to be avoiding the vents on the backpack. I also decided to mix the dark silver with the black for some of the more decorative elements of the model. However, part of me kind of wished I left these alone. I think it kind of looks cool to leave the entirety of the model red, similar to the Aquila. After doing so, I would begin painting in the eyes of the model using some bold titanium white. I'm really letting this pool into the eye sockets. I'm not 100% sure I like the way that I painted the eyes of this model. It was more of an experiment of sorts. I'd also be sure to clean up any areas that the white spills onto using a little bit of black mixed with Mephiston red. And to fill in the eye sockets, I'm using some Data System Glow from Army Painter Fanatics. I just wanted to test out the color. I think a tried and true method is just simply using a little bit of Caran d'Aras green with the white. I was pretty happy with that black mixed with the dark silver, so I'd actually go over a lot of the areas that were initially just going to be black with this mixture. This being the tubes on the helmet, the skull, and the little nodules on the backpack. Coming back to the sword, I decided to paint the more decorative element using a little bit of light bronze from Pro-Acryl. Sorry, light bronze. Coming back in on the model, I feel like the red was almost a little too blank, so I decided to use my same mix of dragon red with the dark worm flesh, and I would add in my little sketches. Dude, it's no different from how I paint every other Space Marine. I like having them dinged up, they just look cooler that way in my opinion. But after that highlighting, I felt that the model looked a little flat, so I'm going to be shading in all the recesses using a little bit of Oblivion Black Wash. Be very careful when applying this. I'm only applying this in the recesses. I'm being very diligent with my detail brush. Even using it in the Aquila is kind of a dangerous game if you're not careful, so if you don't want to do this step, I totally get it. You could also use Carroburg Crimson. I just felt that the darker color would work a little bit better. And I would also use this on all the metallic bits of the armor. And I mean all of them, including the bronze. Just be sure to get this very lightly, don't go too overboard with it. Plus it just kind of ties everything together. I think what makes this model interesting is it's really deceptive how difficult it is to make it look good. It's such a flat-looking scheme that you really have to do all kinds of crazy things to make it stand out. Now to bring some shininess back to the metallics, I'm dry brushing over using a little Vallejo Model Color Silver. Now you'll probably notice that I haven't talked about the white pauldron, and that's because I had to repaint it like 9 times. To paint it and base coat it, I used a little bit of bold titanium white mixed with some uniform gray from Army Painter Fanatic. And I would begin shading it using some Soulblight Gray. I really want to be diligent with this. I really hated painting the white on this model. So I think that this is a good setup to more of a Celestia Gray with better consistency. Now while this dried, I would go back in using my Dragon Red mix, and I would touch up the model a little bit just by adding in some more freehand highlights. As you can see, I'm just kind of sketching on where the highlights are from my light source. Being that this model has such a flat look, I find that just sketching in more highlights to really make it pop out is what really gives this visual interest. It's kind of a deceptively challenging scheme to pull off. But now it's time I show you how to do the chapter badge, and I redid this like 9 times. So to make things simple, I'm using a mechanical pencil and I'm just sketching out the sword. As you can see, I kind of mess it up a little bit, but that's okay. The uniform gray mixture really allows you to kind of touch this up without much effort, and I'm not 100% tracing everything that I draw on here. This is more just a generalistic idea of where the sword should be. Now to actually paint over the sword, I'm just using some Mephiston Red. Go slowly with this. Just trust me, go slowly. It's really, really easy to mess this up. Red over white paint is really hard to clean up, so just take your time. This footage is sped up about 4 times, so you can tell that I'm really being diligent not to spill over, and I still kinda do it. I'm just very gently sketching this on, and yeah, I do kinda go over some of the sketches I make, but as you can see with the blood drips, I kinda miss the initial pencil sketches entirely. This is mostly because the blood drips were a little too close together, but that's okay. As you can see, I'm just slowly tidying up the sword, and I'm just painting it in similarly to how we did the Star Dragon. It's just rinse, repeat, cleanup. Freehanding little elements, especially like this, is all about adding in a little bit of paint and slowly cleaning up. The more paint you use, the harder this is going to be. As you can see with the blood drips, it's just simply adding in just a touch of red. And with that, I've got a pretty good looking sword. Admittedly, it's not exactly the same as the original Blood Swords emblem. This is more of a longsword compared to the flared kind of bastard sword that they have going on. But I'm happy with it, especially considering it took so many tries to get this right. If there's one thing that I learned from this video is that the blood swords are a deceptively difficult scheme to pull off. In some ways, I think that I could really go back in and really redo a lot of elements to make them look better. Big part of it is I'm on a time crunch and I wanted to get the video out for you guys. But with that, I'm happy with these two. They're pretty fun to paint, especially the Star Dragons. And for two schemes that I just kind of pulled out of my butt, I'm happy with them. But hey, I hope you found this tutorial as helpful as it is enjoyable. God knows I'm on a bit of a core kick, but like I said in my last video, Warhammer stuff isn't going anywhere. And speaking of Warhammer, yours truly had a little guest spot on a pretty notable Warhammer podcast. That's right, I joined the Astartes Anonymous boyos and we talked about some cool kit bashes. And if you're coming from the Astartes Anonymous podcast, welcome. Here you'll find all kinds of crazy aimless creativity bullshit that I just kind of pull out of my butt on a weekly basis. If you like Warhammer, you like painting, models in general, I'm confident you'll like some of the stuff going on here. But with that, if you liked what you saw, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, share with a friend, and remember to mishmash, kit bash, and paint some fantastic miniatures. And you're gonna. I promise. See ya.